What the f?
Alright, so many of you have been waiting for this video for quite some time of the 1993 Cadillac Seville, the 4.9 Seville that I bought from auction back in March, I want to say. It was quite a while ago. It was still winter weather. And I bought this car for $300 winning bid. After auction fees, I own it for, I want to say $450 total. Might be a little bit less than that, but somewhere in the $400 mark. Now, when I bought the vehicle at auction, this driver's rear caliper was totally seized. The e-brake was stuck on. The brakes were a mess. It had no brake pressure. This vehicle had been sitting since at least 2012. That's the last time it was state inspected. And who knows how much it was being driven, if much at all, before then, because this Seville only has 102,000 miles on it. So again, I purchased it at auction. It had no brakes of any kind. Now the brakes were stuck on it, but in order for me to dolly it home, I had to disconnect that driver's rear brake assembly altogether. I took off the frozen caliper and just threw the rear wheel right back on so I could dolly it. But of course, by doing that, I went from having seized brakes to no brakes of any kind. So because of the complicated situation with the brakes in this vehicle, not that doing the brake work is complicated, but just moving this vehicle around to even work on it, it had no stopping power whatsoever. No e-brake, no brakes, not even low brakes, no brakes. And being that it's a big old heavy Cadillac, it's not something you want to play around with trying to move around with no brakes. So I just had it sitting around since March, always planned on getting around to it. Recently, I accepted the fact that I would never get around to doing the brake work on this vehicle if I didn't just pay a mechanic to do it. Brake lines at home, if you're a DIY guy like me and not a professional mechanic, can take hours. And I'm very glad I did not try to attempt to do it on this vehicle, because my mechanic, every time he fixed one section of brake line, because originally I thought this vehicle just needed one small section replaced, another section would burst. And that happened time and time again. Every time they pull the caddy out, another section of brake line would burst. They'd bring it back in, fix that. So we ended up replacing the majority of the brake lines on this vehicle. There's hardly anything left that's original. Had we seen that coming, we would have just redone the brake lines entirely. But again, they didn't look too bad. The way they're tucked up in these unibody cars, you really can't tell how bad the brake lines are until one bursts, because they usually rust at the top where the salt and the water and all the dirt gets jammed up, and not in the part that you can see. It has almost all new brake lines. The rear brakes have been completely redone. The calipers, the rotors, and the pads, which it needed badly. Fortunately, the front brakes ended up being okay. The calipers were fine. The rotors did have some surface rust on them, but certainly not as bad. And I've been driving this thing around all weekend without any issues with the brakes. The front brakes don't pulsate, they don't squeal. So I lucked out in not having to do the front brakes at all. They were okay. It was just the rear brakes and the brake lines. So after all that brake work and the original purchase price of the vehicle with the auction fees, I'm into this vehicle for just shy of $1,200. And that's for an 100,000 mile immaculate 4.9 Seville, a vehicle you don't come across very often. So maybe you've noticed as I've walked around the vehicle for the past few minutes, but it has almost no body damage anywhere. The body's very straight. There's no body rust anywhere. The paint's in excellent condition. You can see it still has that metallic sparkle when the sun hits it. Now, there are some areas where the paint does need a little bit of buffing and polishing to bring back its optimal shine. Like you see back here, the shine's excellent. Not in terrible shape, but could use a buff and polish to bring back the same shine that you see everywhere else in the vehicle. The wheels and tires, you may remember from a recent video I did, these are actually off a 1996 DeVille that I had bought at the same auction. That car had a North Star V8. Some of you guys wanted me to keep that car, but it had twice as many miles as this vehicle. Not that I ever really care about mileage. I almost have a preference toward high mileage vehicles, because usually by the time they've gotten to that mileage, most of their original parts have been replaced. But that 96 Seville had a lot more body damage. The North Star needed some work. It did not have a head gasket, head stud issue, but it had plenty of oil leaks. The alternator was bad. The exhaust had rotted off, and every brake line on that vehicle were in far worse shape than this one. Even though it still had brake pressure, it was only a matter of time. This vehicle, surprisingly, is far more clean underneath. This was clearly the one to keep. I ended up selling that Seville for a good profit, even after taking off its wheels and tires, which were the reason I bought it to begin with. You can see these are Pirelli tires all around that are basically brand new on some beautiful chrome wheels that I haven't even done anything to clean yet. So they've got some dirt on them, but they're in excellent shape overall. There's no pitting or anything like that, whereas the old wheels that were on this car had a lot of pitting and corrosion on them, and the tires were dry rotted. I, of course, also went through the fluids, changed the antifreeze and the oil. Transmission fluid looks good. This thing shifts like new. It runs like new. Surprisingly, for a car that's sat that long. Fortunately, whoever parked this car many years ago parked it with an empty tank of fuel. And while there's certainly risks to leaving a tank empty that long with rust and moisture, I've been through a few tanks of gas in this thing now, and the vehicle has no misfires, no rough idle, nothing. It runs perfectly, and I've owned many of these 4.9 cars. Admittedly, this is my first 4.9 Seville. I've always wanted one, and like I said earlier, they're not that easy to come by. Let's go ahead and take a look at the interior, which is in even better condition than the exterior, and the exterior is not in bad shape at all. So I haven't vacuumed these carpets or anything. This is actually how the interior was when I got this car from the auction, even after sitting for so many years. But you can see, besides being a little bit dirty, this interior is in fantastic condition. The leather seats, really no wear at all. The headliner is in perfect shape. The steering wheel, no major wear at all. Everything works electronically, the radio, all the power seat functions, the heated seats. Same story for the back seat, in excellent condition. This repair manual is actually in the vehicle when I bought it from the auctions. So let's take a peek under the hood at what makes this Seville so special. And really, these Sevilles are all getting pretty hard to find, even the ones with the North Star in them. But you really don't find too many of these with the 4.9, especially the 4.9 and the center console shifter, which I love. A lot of these, if they had a 4.9, would have a column shift. So a very well-optioned car. I love the color combination. This was a 4.9 Seville I've always dreamed of owning. But this car has a very sporty look and feel to it, even though they didn't do much to differentiate it from the DeVille. It feels a lot sportier. It's fun and fast to drive. The exhaust note from these 4.9s is awesome, just like on my Alante, which is a 4.5, but they have an almost identical throaty V8 sound. Even though this car only makes around 200 horsepower, the torque certainly makes up for that. It feels a lot quicker and sportier and more agile than any 4.9 DeVille I've ever owned. I really haven't done anything else to the engine. This thing ran great at the auction. It ran great after sitting around in my driveway for half a year, and it still runs great. You can see there's all sorts of leaves and acorns built up in here from this car sitting outside. I do have to get those out, but it's remarkable for how long this car sat, how well it runs. Usually you buy something that sat for 3 years and it runs like crap. Never mind a Cadillac that sat for almost 10 years. So I've got the keys right here, and one thing I love is that they're original keys with the Cadillac crest on them. This is that era of GM with this little transponder thing that was a security chip in the key. I took this from the 96 Seville. It was this roadside assistance Cadillac token keychain thing, which looks great on these keys now. But I'm going to go ahead and fire her up. This battery is a little bit weak, but it still fires right up, no issue at all. I'm sure you can hear and you can see that it runs and idles very smooth, and there may be some vacuum leaks and things. Again, I haven't even gotten that far into it. I figured after I did the brake work, I would start driving it around and it would start running lousy and I would dig into it then, but it's still running great. Have a listen. Now, this car will be heading down to Florida very shortly. I've been doing a lot of footage lately, but I haven't uploaded anything because I've been very busy. So I'm not sure if bits of my moving video will be uploaded first or if this video will be uploaded first. So just in case I put this up first, I'll say very quickly that I'm moving back to Miami after having lived up here in New England for just shy of a year. I already sold my house, got my cars scattered all over the place, waiting for pickup. I was supposed to have them picked up yesterday, which ended up being today, which I just moved till tomorrow. I'm sending 9 vehicles down first to Miami, and I haven't even bought a house down there yet. I sold my old house I had down there. I did a video on that a while back. I've been negotiating a deal on a property down there, but I haven't signed a purchase and sale agreement yet. So I haven't even bought a home down there yet. I do have a little place I've been renting for the past year since I spent so much time down there, but I can hardly fit more than myself and my 2 animals in there. Never mind my entire car collection and all of the other things that I collect. But I'm still sending down 9 cars because I want to get them down there before snowbirds jack up the auto transport rates. All right, so I'm going to do a quick clip of the Seville driving. So here we go. I'm not even halfway on that throttle. This thing moves nice and easy. Sounds great. All the power you could need. The only thing that needs to be done, and it doesn't need to be done, but it would certainly improve the way this vehicle drives, is the front struts. You can hear them popping around like blown struts do. So that's something I'll take care of sooner than later, especially with the almost brand new tires on this thing. I don't want to chop up these tires with bad struts. We greased up all the steering and suspension components. The steering was a lot more stiff before because all the grease on the ball joints and tie rods and things had dried up from years of sitting. And now this thing steers with absolute ease. There's no binding, there's no creaking. The steering feels perfect, like there's a brand new rack in the car. And you can see here I am coming up to a traffic light, stopping with no issues at all. No shimming of the steering wheel, no squealing, no squeaking, nothing. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Keep an eye out for the next one.